So where we left off last time, we finished talking about the zakah and livestock. So I'm going to do a breakdown, inshallah, for what we talked about last time. So the first thing we talked about, what was the first category of zakat that we talked about? So the first category that we talked about was livestock, right? Right? So livestock. So we have cattle, camels, sheep, and goats. Correct? Now, can someone remind me quickly what the breakdown for them was? Leave camels alone. Camels, we'll just say. Whatever. Like it's not about the sequence. So what is for cattle? What is it? What's the أول نصاب البقر is what? أول نصاب البقر 30, right? So it has to be more than 30. Right? It has to be more than 30. In 30 we give a tabi', and in 40 we give a musinna. A tabi' is a 1 year old, and musinna is a 2 to 3 year old, right? Camels, what is the awwal nisab al camels? Yeah, so awwal nisab al camels has to be bigger than 5, and then it's complex from there. It's quite complex. Camels, you have to sit down and do a long study in terms of how it's going to be. The first up till 24, you have to give away. The zakah is going to be in the form of sheep, meaning you have camel, but you give zakah in form of sheep because it's cheaper. Then after that, you give in the form of camels themselves. I should give a camel away or two, depending on the age group, and it's a bit complex. For sheep, what's the awwal nisab al-ghanam? Has to be more than 40. More or equal to, right? 40. وفيها شاة جذعة, right? And in this you have to do a شاة جذعة. And then the breakdown after that is just you end up in every 400 4. So this leads up to within 400 you give 4, in 500 you give 5, etc. So that's the breakdown for livestock. Correct? Alright, that's what we studied last time. So today we're going to study something different. We're going to do money.
Is there no sunnah for zakat?
No. Zakat is one thing. Yeah. There's not breakdown doesn't apply to zakat at all. Now, if you guys remember last time what I said when I talked about livestock, I said that livestock, in order for us to give this type of zakah, we have to deal with it as if it's livestock. What are the conditions for it being for us treating it as livestock and not as trade goods? What were the conditions? Do you remember from last time what the conditions were?
1 year? Or the reason?
No, so there are universal conditions for zakah in general. You have to be Muslim. You have to have, you have to own, you have to full ownership of the livestock, of the money, whatever it is that you have. You have to have a minimum amount of it, and then a year has to pass by. You have to be free. Slaves don't have to pay zakah. So these are universal conditions. But for livestock, for us to treat camels and cattle as livestock and not as trade goods, there are certain conditions. Because if you have camels and you have them with the intention of selling them, not the intention of, so for us to treat them as livestock, they have to be with the intention of reproduction, milk, and what was the third one that we talked about? Slaughter. Very good. If this is why I have this livestock, then this is how I do zakah for them. However, if this livestock has the intention of selling, I'm going to sell them, then I treat like trade goods. Basically like money. We're going to treat them like money now. We're not going to treat them like livestock. It's a whole different breakdown, and I'll show you once we do money, inshallah, in a second. Right? If they're working animals, what do you do then? Working animals. No zakah. Right? That have to be working animals. Now, what is an extra condition regarding livestock? Besides the general zakat condition. We talk about the zakat condition. You have to be Muslim, you have to be free, you have to have full ownership. A year has to go by for most of them besides agriculture. And it has to have a minimum amount. What is an extra grazing? Yes, natural grazing. Right? Natural grazing. So it has to be naturally grazed. So there's an extra condition or specific condition for livestock, which is natural grazing. If you pay for their grazing, if you pay for what they eat, then you don't have to pay zakah anymore. If you pay for more than 50% of what they eat, then you don't pay zakah in them anymore. But if you tell me, what if I pay for what they eat and I have them with the intention of selling? You treat them as trade goods. In trade goods and money, there's no condition of grazing. Grazing only applies if you have this livestock with the intention of reproduction, slaughter, or milk. That condition only applies if this is why you have the livestock. And then you look at this breakdown. So that's what we studied last time in terms of livestock and zakah. Now we're going to talk about money. So in the text where we are, when yusabu dhahabi, because we're talking about dhahabu fidda, gold and silver. ونصاب الذهب 20 مثقالا وفيه ربع العشر وهو نصف مثقال وفيما زاد بحسابه. So نصاب الذهب, the minimum amount of dhahab, of gold, is 20 مثقال or 20 dinar. The word dinar and مثقال are used interchangeably here. Is 20 dinar or 20 مثقال. وفيه, right? وفيه ربع العشر, and you give zakah a quarter of a tenth. So what's a quarter of a tenth? So a quarter times a tenth is 1 on 40. Not 1 on 14, 1 on 40, which equals 2.5%. All right, so 1 over 40 is 2.5%. So you give 2.5%. وهو نصف مثقال. So if you have 20 مثقال, you give 1/2 of a مثقال. Because that's 1 on 40 from 20, or 2.5% of 20, right? وفيما زاد بحسابه. And as it increases, it increases. So if you have 20 dinar, 2.5% is a half. If you have 30 dinar, then you times it by 1 over 4. If you have 40 dinar, it becomes 1 dinar, and so on and so forth. Meaning it turns into a mathematical equation. You just do the math. There's nothing else. All right.
That's meant for selling and buying, not for.
Hold on. We'll come to that in a second. Give me a minute, because that's going to be an important question. Alright, so that's the minimum amount of gold. Now, when yusabu al-wariq, and the minimum amount of silver, mi'ata dirham is 200 dirham. Of course, I'm going to break this all down into something that is more feasible for us. Just let me explain what's written in the matn text, and I'll explain to you what. So 200 dirham. وفيه ربع العشر, and we also pay a fourth quarter of a tenth, which is 1 on 40, which is 2.5%. وهو 5 دراهم, which adds up to 5 dirham. وفيما زاد بحسابه, and And as it increases, of course, the math will lead for it to increase. وَلَا تَجِبُ فِي الْحُلِيِّ الْمُبَاحِ زَكَاةٌ. And there is no obligation in jewelry that is used for zina, for adornments, zakah. I mean, there's no obligation to pay zakah for adornments, for gold and silver that the woman would have to wear. And if you even have some gold or some silver, if you have gold, you're not allowed to wear gold as a man. Right? You're not allowed to. So if you do have gold that you wear, you have to pay zakah in it because it's huli, it's not mubah. This huli is not mubah. Now, of course, a man who has enough gold to pay zakah on, wearing it, usually doesn't really care about zakah to begin with. But in case he does, then he has to pay zakah for that. Now, and of course, I'll go into more detail with that in a second. Now, what is 20 mithqal? What is 20 mithqal of gold? It adds up to, put this down, this is an important figure, 85 grams. 85 grams of gold. What about fidda? Fidda, there's different numbers. Here, he's using something a bit higher than what I'm used to. So I'm going to use a number that I know, which is 595. Of course, this number is not going to be important at all in a second. I'll explain why. What does 85 grams add up to in terms of money today? So what is it? How much is it worth today, right now? Canadian dollars? And this adds up to maybe, I don't know, $600. I'm not sure, something like that. It's not important. So 45, or a bit over $4,500 is what nisab of dhahab is. Now, there's something important that we have to talk about in a minute. When we talk about money, there's a difference between what money is and what currency is. And this is something that we have to establish and distinguish in terms of understanding how we're going to do zakah. When we talk about zakah, this is talking about money. Money is currency that will hold its value for a very, very long time. Gold has always been valuable to the human race. It always has been, is today, and probably will be forever. However, cash, this is currency. This currency doesn't hold its value for a long time. That's why we always have inflation. That's why if you took from me, if I lent you $50 50 years ago, and then you came back today and said, here's $50, I'm not going to be very happy with that. Because that's not fair, because you took from me currency that had a certain value based on how much gold there was in the bank at the time to back up that currency. And today you're bringing me $50 that has a very smaller amount of gold to back it up, if any at all, today. So it's not fair. So when we don't talk about money. We don't say, okay, $4,500 is the amount of money you need to have in the bank in order for you to pay zakah. No, you have to look at how much 85 grams of gold is today. And that's how you know how much zakah, if you have enough to pay zakah or not. So every time you're going to pay zakah, you have to look at 85 grams of gold. This is the amount. You have to see how much that costs, and do you have that amount of money sitting in your bank account for a year or not? Remember, we're talking about money sitting in your bank account for a year. So let's say you have a bank account that has $3,000 right now. Next year there's still $3,000. You don't pay anything because that's not nisab based on that money. Then tomorrow morning, you wake up and you have $4,500 in your hisab, right? The moment you have $4,500 or more, so you see, is that nisab? Because I'm telling you right now that this is nisab. $4,500 and more, that's nisab. That's the minimum amount. So you have that now on your bank account. So you mark down that day. That is day number 1. You look at the lunar calendar. It's the 1st of Jumad al-Ula, 1439. Now, exactly on 1440, and the 1st of Jumad al-Ula, you take a look at your bank account again, and you see how much money you have. If you still have more than $4,500, then you do the math and you pay zakah. If you have less than $4,500, then you don't pay anything at all. Then you're good to go. But let's say you have, mashallah, you're working and you're making money, and now, you have $20,000 in your bank account, or $25,000 now, mashallah, and you made the money. You're making the money, mashallah, you're doing well. You have $25,000 in your bank account. But you're going to tell me, but I only got the 10,000 last week in my bank account. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter when you got it. You were blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with money. Be very happy. Don't be cheap. And don't start looking for ways out of it. You have more than nisab. A year later, you look at your bank account. You have $25,000. You do the math. You do the math. You times it by 2.5%. Basically, you divide it by 40. That's what you just divide that number by 40. I have no idea what that is divided by 40. Someone do the math and give me the number. And then that's how much you have to pay zakah. Now, this day is the day you paid zakah. It marks the day that you start counting again. Now you look at, after you pay zakah, you look at the number that is left. Is it more than the nisab? Is it more than $4,500? Is it worth more than 85 grams of gold? You're like, yeah, of course it is. It's still worth that. Then you start counting again. And the year after, 1441, on the 1st of Jumada al-Ula, you look at your bank account again. And if it's over 4,500, you pay zakah. And that is how you go by doing your money. This is the simplest way to do it. There are many other more complicated ways that I don't understand the point of their complicity. There's really no point. Their complexity is not justified in my book. I don't see why. You just look at your bank account. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you capital. You have money now. We're not taxing you. This is not your income. I didn't ask you how much money you're making. I don't care how much money you're making, nor does zakah care about it. Meaning the Sharia is not asking you how much money you're making. It's saying how much money do you have? How much gold and silver do you have right now? Right? We look at currency because it's backed up by gold and silver. Now, in the future, this will be harder to do if Bitcoin actually makes it, which I don't think it will. But if it actually does, it'll become more difficult because it's not backed up by gold and silver. What will we do? We'll just see how much is 85 grams of gold worth. How much Bitcoin do we have to spend to get 85 grams of gold, and that'll be the nisab. And then you'll just count from there. So there'll be no big difference. But what will become more difficult is the fluctuations of the value of the currency. I mean, the currency will start to fluctuate extremely because it's not backed up by gold and silver, which is what causes a lot of the financial disasters previously and today modern history.
Zawahad only has one Bitcoin, and one Bitcoin is worth 25 grand, and that's all he has as property.
Sure.
Does he have to sell that to make the zakah?
So you have to break it down. I mean, that's the point of currency. Currency has to be divisible. It's not currency if you can't divide it. Back in the day, if I had like a kilo, I grow potatoes, right? And you have a donkey. I want a donkey, and you want potatoes. Or I don't want the donkey, you want the potatoes. And you're like, here, give me potatoes, and I'm asking, what are you going to give me for it? Let's say it's not a donkey, let's say it's a cow. I don't want the whole cow. I want just like part of the cow. You're like, well, I can't divide the cow. Like, I'm not going to chop off its leg and give it to you so you can go and eat it at home. So what do? So cows and potatoes aren't currency. They don't work because you can't divide them. They're not the same. That's why Bitcoin, if it's going to actually make it as a currency, it has to be divisible. I mean, you got to be able to divide it into smaller amounts so that we can sell and buy and give change from it. If you can't give change from something, we're not playing Monopoly. You have to be able to give back change for the exact amount of what you bought or what you sold. So the problem with the Bitcoin and different currencies is it going to be a currency? It has to have all these attributes and characteristics of a true currency, which one of them is being divisible.
But you can divide it.
Yeah, so I don't know if we can. He said if it's one Bitcoin, what do I do? He said you should be able to divide it. If you can't divide it, then that's a problem. But if you can, then we should be good, inshallah.
About reaching in Nisab. Let's say that at the first Jumada you reached in Nisab, but the next month he went below.
No, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Then you went up.
The day you reach Nisab, you put the day down. That's it. Now you count a year. Now you count a whole year. What happened if you could go minus 4,500 in your bank account? You could owe the government $4,500. Doesn't make a difference. You're going to count a year, right? The nisab existed on this day. Then you count a year. The year has to go. You have to have a year around. Now a year later, you may look at your bank account. You don't have it anymore. Obviously, if things aren't going, then you don't pay zakah. You don't pay zakah if you don't have it next year, right? But if you do have it next year, then you pay zakah on it. So the ups and downs, because there are of course opinions. That's why I'm saying there's more complex ways where they say, what happens if you go bankrupt or in the middle of it, or see, there's very little evidence to support whether we start counting again and again and again. That's not how it's done. You have capital, it's there, you count for a year. A year later, we'll take a look at it again. We don't take a look at it within that year. Not next week, not next month, not 6 months in. We take a look at it. It's like the tax return, like in terms of how we think about it. We take a look. Okay, I'll see you next year. Don't come in the next week yelling, "Oh, I lost all my money. I don't care. I'll come back and see you next year." If you have 4,500, then you'll pay zakah on that, which is actually a small. What is zakah? What is 2.5% of 4,500? Someone have a.
25, I think.
So what is the amount?
625 and 25. I think it's 625 out of the 25,000. Yeah.
Out of 25,000. Out of 4,500. What is out of 4,500? Times 4,500 by or divide it by 40. Divide it by 40. What do we get?
112.
Yeah, so $100. So $110. That's what you end up paying zakah. So zakah doesn't come in and take away your. Yeah, it's only 2.5%. It's 40 shares. You're taking 1 share. So we don't start repeating the count every time you lose your money.
What I mean is, at least when it gets back to 45, you start the help.
Yeah, no. Once it hits the nisab, that's it. Now you start counting. This is the day that you will continue to count for the rest of your life.
You know, sometimes during the year,
sure.
It will, you will have maybe.
Yeah.
So can you time it with Ramadan? I mean, from Ramadan.
Sure. So you can make the beginning of your year. Let's say the beginning of. You can put whatever. You can put any date you want here. But usually the date that we use is the day that you met nisab. You reached nisab within what you own. Let's say that you reached nisab way before, but you never cared about this thing, or you didn't think about it, you weren't taught properly, you didn't know. That's fine. Whenever you find out, that marks the day that you should start counting. Let's say you didn't do that, then you have to pay a bit more. You have to pay an extra year so that you can start from Ramadan. So pay for it now, and then start counting from Ramadan. And that way you end up. So you have to pay a bit more if you want to choose the day that you want to start counting your wealth in. So you have to pay an extra year if you want to choose the day, or else you just choose the day which is chosen for you, the day that you had more than $4,500 in your bank account. Now, how many people here have $4,500 in their bank account more than that? See, no hands going up, so you guys are good. No, there's nothing I'm saying. Like, my audience is mostly young people. They don't have 4,500. I don't have. It doesn't make a difference. But once you do, you mark that day and you start counting. A year later, you have to look back at your bank account, and if you have more or less, you give zakah based on it, and you do that every year till the day you pass away. And because again, you're giving away from what Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is blessing you with. Like you have to remember yourself what money is at the end of the day. Yes, Muhammad.
You said that the 2.5% is from the gold and silver or the wealth that you own. What if that 4,500 is from an asset, that it's generating it, or it's worth that?
Sure. So, what is the final category, or the last category of zakah that we talked about? We didn't go into it yet. The last category is called trade goods. Trade goods are treated exactly like money. They're treated like with the currency that they were bought with. And all trade goods are bought with either gold or silver. Now the thing is, I have to talk about this point. Well, silver is $600 the nisab. So what do we do with this? What do we do with this? There's nothing to do with this, huh? So I'll tell you why this is. Back in the day, this was a long time ago, 1 dinar equaled 10 dirham. 1 golden coin equaled 20 silver coin. Back in the day, back when zakah was first farad, no, 1 dinar was, 20 mithqal was 200 dirham.
Oh.
Right? So that's why the minimum amount is 20 golden coins, and the minimum amount of gold is 200 dirham. Right? What happened back then is that these two, there was a difference. Gold was money. This was money. This was considered money. And silver was considered currency, just like you have today. The paper that you carry is currency. It's just a piece of paper. It doesn't have value within itself. It has value because someone put, it's just a bond saying that I have gold in the bank account in a different bank. That's all it is. Back in the day, gold was money, right? And then silver was currency. So silver in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, 1 dinar equaled 10 dirham. So if you had 10 silver coins, it equaled 1 golden coin. But it was easier to break it down like that because gold, one dinar gold, bought a lot of stuff. It bought a lot of things, and not everyone had something to give you back. Didn't have cash, change for it. So what you did you would take 10 silver coins instead, and that way you could buy everything you wanted with 10 silver coins instead of having one big golden coin that is much more expensive and is worth a lot. It's like instead of carrying around $500 bill, which we don't have here, but a $500 bill, or carrying a bunch of 20s. Way easier to carry a bunch of 20s. So back then, silver was currency and gold was money. So what do? Do we follow the minimum amount of currency or money? Always money. Always the currency that carries its value throughout time, which is why gold till this day still carries its value. However, silver has lost its value significantly in the last number of centuries, to the point where it's almost worth nothing. Imagine it's worth $600 today. It used to be worth $4,500. That's a huge loss in the value of silver. That's why we don't count silver when we look at minimum amounts anymore. Imam Shafiee back then, he said you wouldn't add them together anyway. So Imam Shafiee, out of all the Jumhur said no, you would. But the Shafiee said no. You looked at the nisab of dhahab, you looked at how much gold you had, and if it met 85 grams, you would give zakah. And then you would look at fidda alone. If you had 200 dirham, you would give zakah. If you had less than nisab in both, you had less than the minimum amount in both. So let's say you have 80 grams of gold, but you had 100 dirham of fidda. Would you add them together? So the Shafi'iyya said no. Only the Shafi'iyya said no. Everyone else said yes, you add them together because this is currency that is backed up by gold. So it's all one thing. But the Shafi'iyya said no because they saw, Imam Shafi'i thought both were money at the time, but that's how he viewed them at the time. Of course, this has changed significantly. So that's an important point. Yeah.
If you maintain the nisab, which is 4,500, but you owe your brother 20,000, and you owe on your house.
So this is where the difference of opinion enters in terms of does someone who is in debt pay zakah. So they differ. Scholars differ on whether someone in debt pays zakah or not. Some of them say no, they don't. He doesn't pay zakah because he's in debt, and some of them say he does. Now the question that kind of fixes the problem is, why do you have nisab if you're in debt? Why do you have nisab if you're in debt? If you're in debt, you should be giving. Why aren't you paying people back? Why do you have nisab? Understand the idea here? Why would you? Yeah.
You have a soft loan, let's say 50,000, and you have 4,500 in your account. You cannot even pay for that.
Yeah, the thing is, why aren't you paying back people? Why do you have a nisab with you? That's the question that they ask. Or that's why, based on that, scholars have answered whether they justify you having $4,500 in your account, even though you're in debt by the thousands to other people. Maybe you should be paying people back if that's the case. Or is it okay for you to have that amount of money? You're just putting it together so you can pay them because they don't want it in smaller. So it depends on the question, and that's why the scholars have differed on this issue. I'm good with the opinion that you don't have to pay zakah if you're in debt, and I say that to students as well. So if you're a student and you have a student loan, then you shouldn't be. Don't worry about zakah and paying money. However, the question is, why do you have nisab if you have a student loan? Why aren't you paying back leave $3,000 in your bank account, and that way this problem wouldn't exist in the first place. Right? The difference is small. Just leave a bit under the nisab and pay people back. But if you have like $100,000 in your bank account and you owe people millions, well, why do you have $100,000 in your bank account? You should be paying people back. And if you're like, well, my agreement with them is that I'm going to pay them back in the next 50, 60 years, then you have to pay zakah. Then you have to pay zakah at that point because you don't know if you're going to live that far anyway. Yeah, so you have to pay zakah if that's the issue, because it's not a matter, because this is no longer a matter of they're asking you for the money and you don't have it. Or you barely have it. This is you have an agreement that you're not going to be paying them back for a long time, for a very long time. That means this money is going to be sitting there for a long time. Now again, you'll find scholars who will tell you don't have to pay zakah on that money, but I don't think it's safe. I think it's much safer for you to pay the zakah if you have nisab. If you know that the agreement of the loan is going to be very, very long term. So we're talking about in decades, and we're talking about something that's agreed upon for because what happens if they forgive you now? Right, then what? You owe like 15 years of zakah that you didn't pay, and it becomes problematic, so it's better to pay, yes.
Can you pay off portions of your zakah throughout the year, or do you have to pay it all at once at the end of the year?
At the end of the year, you just look at the bank account. You just click TD Canada, you look what you got inside. Pay off your credit card, look what you got inside. Is it over 4,500? Pay $100. Pay the amount that you have to pay. There's no portion, because if you don't have nisab, why would you pay? Let's say a year from now, let's say I looked at my bank account today, I hit 4,500. Finally, I hit that mark. Now I start counting, and I made like $1.5 million within the year. But by the time my due date for zakah came, I didn't have 4,500 left in my hisab. Something happened. I had to spend all my money on something else. Do I pay zakah? No, khalas, I don't pay zakah. The concept of currency and money in Islam is that it's not something that you hold on to. It doesn't have value in itself. Gold is not valuable from an Islamic finance perspective. It doesn't have value within itself. Value is in possessions that you wear, eat, drink, learn from, go to, property and assets that you own. It's not. So you're supposed to be recycling money into the economy all the time. As a Muslim, you're not supposed to be gathering money. You're not supposed to be thinking like that as a Muslim. And this is how Islamic finances and Islamic understanding of a system of economics in the world would be based on that idea that money is not valuable in itself. You want to move it on. You want to get something in return that you can benefit from. And that is, by the way, if you understand that, you understand why the world today is so many problems. People, they throw money at countries that have resources and take the resources, because at the end of the day, it's the person who has the resources that will survive, and the guy who just has pieces of paper and gold. You can't eat gold. Gold is, you can't, it looks nice, it's shiny, but you can't eat it. It doesn't teach you anything. It doesn't keep you warm. It doesn't do much. It's just a piece. So you want to keep on moving it in Islam. And if you choose as a Muslim not to move it around, right, and you have enough, then you have to pay zakah in it. That's all the idea is. If you're moving it around, some people are billionaires. They don't pay zakah. They don't pay zakah. They're always moving money. They're always moving the money. The money comes in, they buy assets, and they move it around. They have people working, they start businesses. They're not keeping money stagnant. The moment you put cash or money, currency stagnant, that is when you have to pay money on it. That's when you have to pay zakah on it. And if you're someone who's moving money around a lot, you don't have to pay too much zakah because you're moving money around. You're not just accumulating numbers. You don't have $1 billion sitting in the bank account for a year. Why do you have $1 billion sitting in the bank account for a year? Why aren't you moving that around? Why aren't you opening businesses, starting giving people jobs? When you open a business, you give people jobs. You give back to the economy. You benefit as well. It gives value to the currency that you've got. Your currency will die if people aren't working and making money, because it doesn't have any value anymore. That's why it's not wrong for you to continue to move money around so you don't pay zakah. You're not supposed to keep money in the bank so you can pay zakah. Zakah is there in case you keep money or currency stagnant for a whole year. And you're not asked to pay half of it or a third of it. You're paying 1 out of 40, yes.
But people can falsify this and maybe can abuse it by moving the money like right before the time of the zakah.
What do you mean by moving?
Not like they buy houses, buy real estate.
Fine, buy. That's business. Buy whatever you want. You never know, that house can lose its risk. You could lose all its value in a day. Something could happen and it's burnt, and now you just threw away $300,000 to $400,000. It's up to you. If the intention is to falsify stuff, there's a lot of ways for you to falsify things. If you want to, if the intention is I want to find a loophole in zakah system so I don't pay zakah, it's up to you. We look forward to paying zakah because the concept of zakah is purification. This is wealth Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave. You want to purify it from any haram in it so you can eat it and you know that's only halal is coming to your stomach. Trying to run away from zakah, you can find ways to do it, and I probably may not have a good answer to tell you, no, this is wrong or right, but you should be living your life with your money with a certain mentality, which is money doesn't have value. I need to move it, invest, start companies, get assets with it, not just accumulate it. And if I do accumulate it for any reason, like I'm holding on because I want to buy something later on, then I owe zakah within a certain percentage of it. And that's just how we're supposed to think about money to begin with as Muslims. Yes.
What if you're constantly moving money around and you don't get the nisab over a year? So technically you don't have to pay zakat, but you still choose to. Would that be sadaqah or zakat?
No, it wouldn't. Well, if you don't have $300, $450, $4,500, why would you pay? The nisab is a small amount. If you're under the nisab, why would you pay zakah? You need money. You don't have money right now. You don't have currency. Now we're going to talk about trade goods in a minute. We're going to talk about things that are set up for selling in a second. Again, if you buy a land and you don't have anyone work on it, and you don't work in it, and you don't make any money off it, and you're just sitting there waiting for prices to go up so you can sell, now you have to pay zakah on the value of that land that you bought. Right? So it's not about just moving money around and just buying things and leaving them. No, it's about moving the economy. It's allowing the economy to grow, and for you to actually move your money around and start businesses with it, and invest with it, not make it stagnant in another form. So money can be stagnant in the form of gold. It can be stagnant in the form of currency, and it can be stagnant in the form of pieces of land, and in cattle. It can be stagnant as you can buy 5,000 head of cattle, and your intention, you're going to sell them one day. Now these are trade goods. These trade goods fall under the same law. How much are 5,000 head of cattle worth? You do the math. You look into the value. You do the math. You see, is it nisab? Is it nisab? Then you have to pay. You have to give zakat from it. You can give zakat in terms of in the form of currency for it, or you can give zakat from the actual asset that you have itself. I mean, you can give zakah from the land that you own. You give 2.5% of it away to fuqara and masakeen, or you can give it away in currency if you have enough currency. But the idea here is not to turn, because stagnancy is the problem. Just putting assets and not having them do anything. You're not working them. It's not turning into a business. It's not money that is being recycled into the economy to provide jobs and to provide produce, because you need to produce as a community. You're supposed to be able to produce. If you have money, you have resources, you produce with it. If you're not, you're just keeping it stagnant, then this becomes a problem. You have to pay zakat on it. Yes.
Sheikh, here they have this thing where you only have to pay $10 or $15 or whatever it is. Where did that number come from? I don't know if you heard here, they always advertise, you just have to pay $10 for zakat, and they usually say it after 8.
This is zakat al-fitr. This is a whole different thing. We'll come to that in a second. This is zakat al-mal, not zakat al-fitr. We're talking about zakat al-mal. This is looking at your assets and what you owe. Zakat al-fitr happens after Ramadan. It'll come up in a minute. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Now, after we make a calculation for the zakat,
yes.
For example, now we need to pay like 1,000.
Yes.
One of my friends, he said, maybe if I pay it now, maybe there is no more people around me. Okay? Then he can just make this 1,000 and keep it in his home, and sometimes after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, just distribute. But in the end...
So in an ideal situation, yeah, but there's no such thing. You're telling me there's no one in need in the world today for him to give $1,000 to? Sheikh, there's no ummah that's in more need than the Muslims.
But sometimes there is some critical situation, and for example now the situation is normal, maybe after 2-3 months, maybe.
No, the Muslims live all around the planet. Once you have your zakah, you have your money, you find, and there's ability to give it to people who are in need, Muslims, whether they're living in your community, outside your community, they could be living anywhere in the world, you give it to them. The only time you wouldn't give zakah is that if there's literally no one to take it, like there's no one to take it at all, then you would hold on to it. As the Jumhur said, you would hold on to it. Some Shafiee, some fuqaha said that you could, you don't have to pay if there's no one needing it. But the Jumhur said that money is held on by the government, and once the need comes, then you use. If someone goes into poverty, then you use it for them. But there's always need. I mean, there's never a situation where there's no need. Ya Sheikh.
Like it's a priority. For example, now for example in Egypt there is some people that are in trouble in accidents, something like this. Then my friend has, mashallah, he's very rich, so he give like 100, his zakah 100,000, too much money. Then he cannot put all this money one time for the poor people, but he gives some like 50% for the poor people, and the other 50% keep in the emergency if someone needs blah blah blah. But this
no, you don't hold on as an emergency unless people are not in need. That's not acceptable at all. I can't say, okay, there's these poor people, my zakah is 50 million, I'm a billionaire, so here's 25 million to these people and hold on to the rest in case something. No. As long as people are still in need, I have to pay it immediately.
to hold for himself. He already, this is...
Yeah, that's not his job. As long as people need money, he has to pay. He only holds if no one's in need anymore. If he looks up, does anyone need money? Muslims, is anyone in poverty? Fuqara, masakeen, amalin, alayhi. We'll talk about the different categories we spend zakat to. None of them exist in the world. Hold on to it until they do. But if they exist, you're going to pay. You have to pay now. Like that's the whole point of us saying that there's a year.
Any time limit before you should pay, after you calculate?
So immediately, ASAP, like as soon as ASAP, as soon as you can pay it, you should pay the zakah.
If I need to pay some money to get that money to some poor people, like let's say in my own community there's no poor people anymore,
yeah.
I need to pay money. Does that money come from the zakah itself, or do I have to put money on top of that?
They differed on that. The more prominent position is that you use the zakah money for it, because it just means to arrive. If you want to be safe, use your own. If you want to be safe, yani, just to make sure that you're paying the amount full, use your own. When it comes to zakat, be safe rather than sorry, always, yani, because there's difference of opinions on these issues, whether you're like if you're sending the money through Western Union and there's like a $26 or $30 fee, do I use the zakat money or my own money? Be safe and use your own, just so that you don't end up sorry later. Yeah.
Like how would you do that if you can't tell what the overhead is for certain charity organizations? Because some organizations you make donations to them and you trust that they'll distribute, but some of it goes to administration and other fees, but they don't say it.
Well, there's two things. If you have no reason to doubt these institutions, then you shouldn't doubt them. Especially if when you tell them this is zakat money, they tell you this is where we're going to put it. If that's a big concern, I mean, this is becoming more of a problem, then you should pay zakat yourself. Go look in your community around you for people who are in deservings of zakat yourself. And that's why zakat is the only fard of the 5 faridah. Only one of the 5 arkan of Islam that is organized by the government. Yani zakat was always organized by the khilafah. The khalifa does it, the imam, the governor of the state, he goes and he collects zakat, and then they distribute it. It's not just you doing it on your own. You're supposed to give it because they have a census of who's in need and who's not in need. It makes it easier to distribute zakat, and that's why zakat has that higher level in terms of importance. And there's different rulings regarding them. The last part, وَلَا تَجِبُ بِالْحُلِيِّ الْمُبَاحِ zakat, and there's no obligation for us to pay zakat in jewelry, in mubah, in permissible jewelry, gold and silver. So a lady owns a certain amount of jewelry, and that amount of jewelry arrives at is nisab, so it's $4,500 or more, which is a lot of money. As long as the intention is jewelry, then she doesn't have to pay zakat for the jumhur. So the Shafiee, the Maliki, and the Hanabila all agree to that. It's only the Hanafiya that say you have to pay in jewelry if it reaches nisab, and this is becoming more of an accepted opinion in modern times. So in modern times, and today, if you talk to more scholars today, they agree to that a bit more. The reason behind it is that having jewelry over $4,500 worth over $4,500 of money is actually. They're considering extravagant. I mean, that's a lot. It's a lot to have. I mean, how much gold should she have? That's one thing. The second thing is that a lot of times people who are getting into financial crises are ending up selling this money, selling the jewelry. So the concept of jewelry is that it's not sellable. It's not something that has a sentimental value. You will never sell it, and no matter what happens, this is not considered to you as money or currency. It's considered to you as adornments. You're not going to sell it. So. Just like your body parts, and you're not going to sell your kid. And that's how we're supposed to be thinking about these things. The moment something becomes sellable, or there's a possibility we sell it, then we start paying zakat. Now, there's a contra-argument to that. The counter-argument that's strong as well, saying, well, your clothing you could sell one day, and you don't have to pay zakat on your clothing ever, no matter how much clothing you owe, and that is true. So there's a back and forth, long argument whether you pay in if you have for a woman's jewelry or not. The best thing to do is just don't own jewelry that exceeds the nisab. Right? Just don't own jewelry that's more than 85 grams of gold. Now, how much is 85 grams of gold in terms of jewelry?
No, it's a lot. It's 5 grams?
85 grams. One really heavy necklace. Yeah, one really heavy necklace. Yeah. So less heavy stuff would be much less than that. So, and if you want to be safe, based on what the Hanafiya said and more of the modern scholars say, then maybe pay zakah on your jewelry. But if you don't, the majority of scholars within the different madhab do not obligate you or the lady to pay zakah on jewelry, even if you only use it once a year or once every 5 years, or it doesn't matter how many times some ladies put their jewelry, never use them, like use them every time maybe. And if someone gets married once every 15 years that she cares about, she wears them and she goes out, that's fine. As long as the intention here is we're not holding on to wealth, and we're not accumulating capital. The intention of this is jewelry, then you don't have to pay zakah. Yeah.
Is the value of diamonds and other stones?
Diamonds don't enter this equation at all. Diamonds and other stones don't enter this equation. We're only talking about gold. Only gold, actually. Silver, we don't talk about silver anymore, because silver used to be a currency, and today doesn't carry any value in itself, only if it's backed up by gold. So what we're stuck with is just gold, or whatever currency is capable of, whatever amount of currency will buy that amount of gold, which is 85 grams. And that's how so you count a year, and that's when you start, yeah.
So you said silver is based on silver because it's not valuable as gold. Throughout history, gold has always been valuable as silver, but because of used in technology. Gold is just hoarded and put away, but silver is used a lot more.
Sure.
So that change this.
Only if gold becomes currency and silver becomes money. As long as it's gold money and silver only currency, then no, we say this. Basically, we see what more valuable from two things. Gold is more valuable, and silver is used currency. Back in the day, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba did not carry paper currency with them. They never did. What did they carry? They carried silver coins, right? Silver coins would add up, every 10 would add up to 1 dinar. So what is the minimum amount of gold that you have to own? You have to own 20 dinar. If you have 20 golden dinars sitting at home for a year, you have to pay one of them, half of them, as zakat. So, but a lot of people don't own gold at all. They don't want gold in their homes. What they do is they get dirahim. So instead of having 20 golden coins, they get 200 silver coins, and they hold on to that. And then so that's where you start. Today, silver it's not equal anymore. That's not true. Like 1 dinar gold equals around 300 dirham. So that it's changed because this is currency and this is money, and that's what we have to differentiate. So we always stick to gold when we're doing. Well, when you share, they have to down. Is owned by one person? If not, then there has to be a percentage. No sharing, the 50-50 or 60-40, and then everyone their own. I usually use that share, I mean, they both it, but it's owned by one, meaning it's in the name, from an Islamic perspective, either owned by the man or the woman. If it's not, and like, no, this is our money put together, okay, then what is the breakdown of this money? If it's 50-50, then if it's like, if it's $4,500 all in all, then no, there's no zakat on it because it's owned by two people, and each one owns only, whatever the $2,200, $2,300, and that's not nisab. So this has to be established between the man and the woman in the household in terms of who owns the money, who actually owns the assets. Usually the man owns the money, and he pays and he gives his wife and he gives his family, and then he just does that based on how much money he has in it. But if they're both working and they both have rights in this money, and this money is for both of them, then they have to establish what the breakdown is, and whoever has nisab, the minimum amount, has to pay zakah. Okay, so that's money. That's kind of breaking down money for you. We'll talk about. We'll go quickly some more. Not through the whole. We only have minutes, but we'll go. وَنِصَابُ الزُّرُوعِ وَالثِّمَارِ خَمْسَةُ أَوْسُقٍ. The minimum amount. We're going to leave money and livestock. So we talked about livestock. We talked about money. We're going to leave this. We're going to go to something called zurua. Zurua is agriculture. So someone remind me quickly. What is agriculture? Yes? Very good. Perfect. So, wheat, barley, rice, lentils, corn. Anything else? Yeah, so these five are what are they called? Staple crops, right? Staple food crops. They're called staple food crops. These are the crops that are used most commonly all around the world. Till this day, these are the crops that people use all the time. So if you are growing these crops, and most people, if you're going to be, they're a lucrative business because they're easy to sell. If you're growing other crops, they're much more difficult to sell, meaning there's always a risk of the value of it plummeting or fluctuating heavily. These don't fluctuate very heavily in value when you're selling them, regardless of the season. Why? Because they're used all the time. You always need wheat and barley. You always have bread being made all the time. Rice is lentils, corn, they're always being used all the time. So it's not hard to sell them, and people need them a lot. So there's zakat in them for two reasons. The first reason is that they're lucrative. You make money off them. It's easy to make money off them. They don't fluctuate very much. The second reason is that people benefit from them. They're staple crops. Everyone needs them. So it makes sense if everyone needs them that we take zakat and give those who don't have it, because they need it to eat. What's the point of me giving zakat off a crop that people don't really need? It doesn't have that much nutritious value or to people. They don't find the benefit of it. It's nice, but they don't really need it, and that has to be differentiated in terms of importance. So agriculture نصاب الزروع, the minimum amount of agriculture, 5 أوسق. So minimum amount of staple food crops. I'm going to use that term from now on because it's much easier to understand. Is 5 أوسق. Of course, these are measurements. These are measuring tools that they had back in the day, which is وهي 1600 رطل بالعراقي, and it's 1600 رطل. I have no idea what these are, by the way. I have zero idea what these are. I'm just telling you what these are the measurements they have. What do they add up to do? What did I give you the number last time? What was the number I gave you in terms of last time? Here he's giving us 715 kilograms. We did calculations on this before. I'm safer with going with 650 kilograms. So above 60% of a ton. So not half a ton, a bit more than half a ton. So 650 kilograms. If you grew wheat and you had 650 kilograms or more, then you have to give zakah from it. If it's less, you don't pay zakah from it. If it's 500, if you do half a ton, if you put all your, how do you weigh it? You weigh it without its qishr, without any, so you weigh just the actual food that's going to be used. So you don't weigh it with anything else, to be fair. So if you're weighing corn, you have to take off all the, just the cob. If you're weighing wheat, you have to take off what is it?
Kernel.
Yeah, the kernel. You have to get, yeah, exactly. The kernel. Sorry. And wheat, there's the qishrs, the wrapping. Yeah, the shell of the shell of the seed. So you take that off, and you just weigh what you actually took. That's going to be a benefit. It has to be 650 kilograms or more. You can change this if you want to weigh it differently. So you can add a certain. You can do some mathematical equations and say I'm going to just weigh it all together, and this number would differ if that's the point a bit, so that you know what you're doing. Now, what do you pay?
Dried out.
Yeah, dried out. وفيما زاد بحسابه, and the more there is, the more that you have to pay zakah. So what is the amount? وفيها إن سقيت بماء السماء أو السيح العشر. If it is being irrigated, if the irrigation happened with rain or water that flows naturally on the surface of the earth, where you didn't have to go and buy that water, you didn't have to dig a well you don't own, you didn't have to actually put money or effort into this, then you have to pay al-ushur, so 10%. وإن سقيت بدولاب أو نضح نصف العشر. And if you irrigate it using a wheel, back in the day you have to use wheels to get water out of the well, and or you use any other form of irrigation where you have to go and put in labor and money to actually make it, then you pay 5%. نصف العشر, half of a tenth. So half times a tenth is 1 on 20, which is 5%. All right. So out of 650 kilos, what would you pay if you didn't irrigate at all? Meaning you just waited for the rain came down, and it all came, the wheat came out. So 65 kilos. Or can you pay the currency amount?
You have to translate it, right? No. Wouldn't you just translate it over?
Can you? So there's a long debate, one of those epic inter-Islamic bloody battles, whether you're allowed to use money for agriculture and for zakat al-fitr, which we'll talk about next time. The Hanafiya allow it. It's an opinion within the Hanbali madhab, it's an opinion within the Shafi'i madhab, but the majority of scholars, so the majority of the Shafi'iyya, the majority of the Hanabila, and all the Malikiyya say no, you have to give it, you have to pay it with the actual product itself. You have to use the wheat itself. You have to give out the actual, not the value of it, what is it that you grew. Ibn Taymiyyah said that it depends on what's more beneficial for people. What benefits them? Do they want money? Give them money. If they want the actual product, they want the wheat, give them the wheat. Who wants wheat? No, they want bread. Give them money, they'll buy bread so they can get wheat. Things have changed. Back in the day, it's funny, the Prophet ﷺ never ate bread made from wheat in his life, ﷺ, not once. He only ate bread that was made from barley that had its shell. So it wasn't even unshelled barley. It was actually barley with a shell on it. And I've eaten that type of bread. It isn't good. It isn't good at all. Now, you wouldn't eat it. It doesn't taste good at all. It's not nice at all. It's not a... It's healthy, of course. Everything's healthy. It doesn't taste good. Isn't that the sad reality of our existence? That everything that tastes good is just not good.
What's the reason? Did he just not know what they were cooking?
It just was very expensive. Barley is sha'ir is much less expensive than qamh, than wheat, and it's just more expensive to buy wheat that has, and barley with its shell is even less expensive. So that's what he could afford. So I said them in his family, which is interesting to talk about. Anyways, so this is what we need to do with agriculture. Do we talk about any other besides these? For the Shafi'iyya, we don't. If you study more and more into zakah, you'll find that there are other crops that they talk about. There are other crops that that scholars have said you have to pay regarding this crop and about that crop. There are other crops that they talk about. I'm not going to go into that detail because that's a really, really long study that will take forever, and none of you are farmers. Unless you're a farmer, this is not going to be much of a deal to you. But if you are a farmer, you can come to me. I'll refer you to a place where you can go into more details to know which ones are more. Because staple food crops, these are the 5 that are steady. Since that time till today, there are other crops that are becoming more and more stabilized. There's more staple food, like potatoes, and there are others. But generally, vegetables, like for example, if you're growing cucumbers, and you harvest 1,000 kilos, like a ton, there's no zakah on that at all. From the Shafi'i perspective and the Jumhur's perspective as well. Only specific scholars will tell you that you have to pay zakah based on a certain understanding that they have. But this is the generalized way of looking at it, and I'm quite comfortable telling you to do this with agriculture. I don't see that to be problematic at all. Yes?
And you pay upon harvest, right?
Yes, the moment you... So, to finish with this, to kind of differentiate between agriculture and money, what's the biggest difference?
Money, you have to wait a year.
Yes. Here at harvest.
Yeah, what if you have 130 kilograms of each with a staple?
So you don't add anything together. Like the Shafi'i don't add stuff. They don't add livestock. They don't add money, and they don't add anything. Everything has to be totally separate. You'll find scholars that will talk about it differently, but the madhab, generally speaking, the Jumhur are comfortable not adding things together. Each one has to be dealt with individually because they have a different value. Because they have a different value anyway. The value of wheat is different from the value of barley, so adding them is impossible to begin with. All right, so we'll stop with this. Next time we'll talk about fruits. And the final one, which will be trade goods. How is trade goods going to be different than this? How are trade goods may be different than this?
It's not.
They're not. They're not going to be different at all. It's going to be the exact same thing. I'm going to come back and tell you the exact same stuff. It's just going to be in the form of assets. So I could have in my hand 85 grams of gold, or I can have a phone that is worth 85 grams of gold, right? If what I'm doing with this is what I'm doing with this, then I have to pay zakah for both. Just like, and we'll talk about it more, and what I'll explain is the livestock problem. The livestock problem, I spent all time last time explaining to you how you break down livestock. It's very, very confusing. Now, if livestock is being prepared for selling, it's not confusing anymore. It's not confusing at all. You just say, okay, what is the value of the livestock? Is it more than 85 grams of gold in worth? It is. Then you pay 2.5% on it if a year has passed. If a year has passed, then you pay 2.5%. That's it. Which makes a big difference in terms of how much you end up paying. You end up paying way more through this. This is way more, this costs more money. Having assets that are sitting around, you're not using them, they're not being used, they're not being recycled into the economy, will always be more expensive to you, which encourages you to do what? This encourages you to recycle wealth into the economy, move it around, keep it working, start businesses, provide jobs, keep things running. Don't hold on to wealth. It's only, what do we know today? What is the, how much, so when we talk about the 10%, the richest 10% on the planet, how much money do they have?
80%.
Yeah, over 85% of the world's wealth. Over 85, well over 85. I heard a number of around 91, like a while back. 10% of the richest 10% on the planet. So there's 90% of the human race sitting around, fighting over 15% of the wealth. And 10% owning over 85% of the wealth. Why? Because it's being stagnantized. It's just staying where it is. No one's moving it around. It's not being recycled back into the economy. They're not starting jobs with it. They're not doing anything. They're just all keeping it where it is. And of course, there's a big, the monetary system of the world is messed up, which makes things really difficult to even begin talking about in zakah. As a Muslim, we still have to understand the importance of zakah. We have to participate in it. We have to pay it on time based on its nisab. I'll end with that. Once this is done, we'll answer questions.